Okay, Assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. We are seeing more people join this webinar, and I hope more will continue to join us throughout the next hour. My name is Petra Alsoofy, and I'm the Outreach and Partnerships Manager at ISPU, the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. And it's my pleasure to have the wonderful panelists we have today, Dr. Ihsan Bagby, Sheikh Abdullah Oduro, and Dr. Tamara Gray. So I'm going to use both of her titles. The platform for today, or the format for today, is I'm going to do a quick introduction of ISPU and our research on this topic, followed by a time for our panelists to provide their thoughts and wisdom and share additional resources for us on today's topic, which is creating more welcoming mosques for our brothers and sisters who are converts. And then there's a time period we'll have for Q&A from our audience. So please use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen to submit your questions throughout the webinar. Do not share them in the chat box because we might not be able to see all of them there. And then we could keep track of them through the Q&A box and follow up later if we do not get to all the questions. After the webinar, either today or tomorrow, you should receive a follow-up email with tons of resources on the topic and the recording of today's webinar. Originally, we planned to live stream this webinar, but we decided against it in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in the African-American community today. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into introducing ISPU. For those who are not familiar with the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, we provide objective research in education about American Muslims and to support well-informed dialogue and decision-making. Our goal and our objective is we want every decision that's being made about American Muslims to be well-informed and based on facts. We make an impact, ISPU make an impact and a difference through discovering new research, new facts, provide new analysis. We seek case studies that could be helpful to community members and policymakers. And then we educate the public or the general public with our finding, with our research, and make it, of course, available to anyone on our website. If you have not visited our website, I highly recommend. There's a ton of information and resources on any topic you could think of. And then topics that we do not cover, we have a wonderful list and community of scholars who do research and cover those topics and are affiliated with the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. And then finally, we do what we're doing today, which is equip community leaders, media, nonprofit, religious leaders, and policy makers with our research so they could use it for good. So this webinar is part of a series this whole month on creating more welcoming mosques and more welcoming Islamic schools. As everyone is discussing how to reopen these institutions safely in the midst of this epidemic that we're in, from a health standpoint, we as a community are discussing how can we make them more welcoming, more inclusive for people who have felt excluded or have felt unmasked for so long. And so for the whole month, we have different webinars talking about making more welcoming mosques for converts, for young adults, women, getting race right, which I encourage all of you to join all of these webinars, but specifically June 22nd, we are discussing how to get race right in our community. And then finally, addressing Islamic schools and Islamic weekend schools. Are they really preparing the next generation of American Muslims for the life ahead? You'll see here this project, Reimagining Muslim Spaces, is one of the many research projects that we have done and we continue to do. This is more internally focused. So our focus at ISPU, we focus on capacity building within the American Muslim community. So how can Muslim Americans really focus on building their own internal capacity, their own internal institutions, addressing their own issues within their own communities, and do all of that guided by objective and well-informed research. We also focus on informing public policy and decision-making at a policy level. Again, things that impact the American Muslim community, but impact democracy and pluralism in this country. And then we provide a platform for creating thought leadership. So Reimagining Muslim Spaces is a study that looked at mosques and Islamic institutions or Muslim institutions to see what they're doing right, what are some of the issues that exist there, and what are some best practices or really case studies that are working or doing really good work that we could highlight for the rest of the community to use. To start with, why do mosques matter? I mean, most of us will answer, well, this is the place we get our spiritual guidance. This is the place we're connected to our religion for some. But the research also showed that mosques matter in so many other ways. Our research showed that frequent mosque attendance is actually linked and connected to more volunteerism, better mental health. So think of those when you're thinking of all the issues that exist in the Muslim community today. And then higher civic engagement. We know many people who are spending a lot of time and resources on addressing mental health issues. Frequent mosque attendance actually could be part of the solution. Same with higher civic engagement. Everyone is talking about how to get the Muslim community more engaged in the civic process, in the civic engagement part in this country. The mosque is actually part of the answer, not part of the problem. But unfortunately, we also find that sometimes mosques are often alienating to many people, including women. This is a topic that have been discussed many times, and we will continue to discuss it until we get it right. Converts, young people, race-related issues. And so those are people who have felt alienated and unmasked. The challenge is many young people in our community, women converts, feel alienated. Again, like they feel they don't belong to the mosque, they don't feel they belong in the mosque, they don't feel welcomed, or that their issues are important in the mosque. Mosque leaders themselves have complained and talked about the lack of volunteers. How many times do they spend, how many hours do they spend actually trying to recruit volunteers for events and programs? And then the lack of commitments from attendees to the mosque and its well-being. And then mosque attendees complain about the lack of unity, the lack of sense of belonging to a mosque they attend, even if they search around. And this is something I personally have felt in many mosques that I try to attend, like I don't belong or it's not a place for me. So why is it important to make sure that our mosques are welcoming? Some of the issues or challenges that we mentioned could be addressed through making or creating more welcoming mosques. Increase volunteers, sustain donors. Think about that, especially in the time right now when everyone is struggling, trying to get to sustain donors, sustain the financial well-being or health of religious institutions. Increase cleanliness. You know, this sounds trivial, but unfortunately, sometimes the mosque is connected to an area that's, you know, if you want to know where the mosque is, look at the dirty section of town. So how do we increase cleanliness in the mosque when attendees could actually clean up after themselves and they don't have to wait for others to pick up after them? Increase spiritual engagement. Promote strong, more vibrant communities. It's not just a place to go and pray and leave, but actually this is a community that could be created for a lot of other activities, where people belong, where families get to know each other. Build hub for hope. So this is where the case studies are highlighted on our website. You will see that mosques, we have case studies of mosques that not only build the spiritual engagement, the volunteers, but they actually created institutions and services that are needed in those communities, whether it's free health clinics, civic engagement centers, rehabilitations programs, and so forth. So we have those case studies in the website that you could look at, and we'll be sending those out in the follow-up email. And then they provide sanctuaries for support in the hostile environment that we live in today, and this is becoming even more important as we're living in the time we live in today. And then, of course, grows the next generation of American Muslims, which I'll demonstrate why this is really important in the next couple slides. Sorry. So the project overview, the goal of Reimagining Muslim Spaces is to produce research-driven recommendation for mosques that are welcoming, inclusive, engaging. This is what the webinars will be talking about. And then to create a hub of hope, resource of community resources. This is the case studies. We will not be diving into those during the webinars, but again, like I mentioned, they will be included in the follow-up email, and they're available on our website. We accomplished this project or these recommendations through an extensive literature review of not only a literature that exists about American mosques and religious institutions, but other faith communities as well. We conducted focus groups across the country. We did analysis of every available poll on American Muslims. We did one-on-one interviews, and we received advice from a diverse task force of experts, which you could find the task force of experts list on our website. And then what became available is a lot of resources for individuals, community leaders, mosque board members, and imams to utilize to really look at their mosques and see what they could work on to implement changes where needed and create more inclusive mosques. So we have a full report that's available. You could, again, read it on the website, or we will be attaching it to the email. We have the case studies. We have a community toolkit, which include pre-test, pre-survey, include the recommendations, presentations, talk, everything you need to do, and then a post-test to measure how the work have really changed or affected your place of worship. So if you're interested in this toolkit, we will be sending the link to sign up for it in the follow-up email, but also it's also available on our website. And we have Dr. Ihsan Bagby, who's the principal investigator on this project, who could share more on this work. Okay. So in the next 2 or 3 minutes, I'll do a very quick run through of the project finding. But like I mentioned, the next generation of American Muslims, this is important to keep them in mind. The American Muslim community is the youngest faith community in the nation. You'll see here 23% of American Muslims are between the age of 18 and 24. And you'll see this does not even compare to any other faith community here. You'll also see that American Muslims, young American Muslims, say that their religion is very, very important to them. Very similar to American Muslims who are 15 and over, which is different from their peers in the general public. In the general public, you'll see 56% of those ages 18 to 26 say their religion is important to them, compared to 91% of American Muslims. Okay, but mosque attendance does not quite match up. Okay, American Muslim community is the most diverse faith community in the nation. This slide is a little bit actually outdated because African Americans make up 28% of the American Muslim community, but I wanted to leave this graph here because it shows, it compares to other faith communities. The diversity of the American Muslim community doesn't even compare to any other faith community we have here. So keep those facts in mind as we talk more about this project and as we discuss other things. The Muslim American community is also diverse in a different aspect, where 50% of its members were born outside of the US, and 50% were born here. But 86% are Americans either through birth or naturalization. So still the majority, but it's a split between 50-50, split 50-50 between those born here and those who are immigrant background, which again, it contributes to the conversation, especially when it comes to race. And also, American Muslim community report, it's most likely to report low income. So we have a third of our community who are at or below the poverty line. And again, keep all of this in mind as we talk about resources, race relations, youth activities, and so forth. So very quickly, recommendations we have on fostering a welcoming community in general for anyone. Most of our focus group attendees and participants talked about the most attractive part of a mosque is the sense of being welcoming and the sense of belonging. They didn't talk about great khutbah, they didn't talk about beautiful buildings, they didn't talk about any of those, even though they're important. But the thing that kept coming up over and over again is the mosque is welcoming, or I felt like I belonged, I have a sense of community, okay? People talked about a simple thing like people gave salam. You know, when I walked in, somebody said salam. You know, we take that for granted. We think this is something that's automatically practiced by everyone, but you'll be surprised at how many people actually don't say salam when they see other Muslims. So, you know, the sense of warmth, smiles, saying salam to those who are coming to the masjid. And the thing they most liked is the generosity and hospitality. We have a participant who went to a masjid, attended a khutbah, in a different language. It wasn't even English. They didn't understand it, but they said, it doesn't matter. I'm coming back to this masjid because I felt like I belonged. I felt welcomed. And of course, we go back to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who said, you will not enter paradise until you believe, and you will not believe until you love one another. So spread salam among yourselves. All right. How to foster a welcoming environment. This needs to be a top-down approach in one way. Need to form a welcoming committee where people are giving salam to each other, are assisting those who are coming to Jum'ah or to other events, striking up conversation with them, figuring out what's their interest in their expertise, encouraging people to be involved. Develop that culture, and it needs to be demonstrated from leadership, where a khutbah could be given about creating a welcoming mosque and providing an example where people could feel like they belong, even if they're not part of that ethnic group or that racial group. And then for our, specifically on today's topic, our brothers and sisters who are converts, addressing their social needs. So again, we know when a brother or sister revert to Islam, many are talking about, okay, we need to educate them on Islam. You know, the education is the most important, which it is, it's really important. But one thing that this project found is that socialization was just as important aspect of that journey for our brothers and sisters when they're reverting to Islam. So Pew Research Center found that according to their research, 1 in 5 Muslim adults were raised in a non-Muslim household. Okay, they might still be living in that non-Muslim household too, so they have that experience as well. The same study found that the same number of Americans raised Muslim in Muslim households are no longer identifying as Muslim, but that's a different conversation. What our focus attendees said is they feel comfortable when they have a friend or they have someone they could socialize with, someone who's gonna help them navigate the uncomfortable and awkwardness of being in a different place. They could talk to people. Recommendation for mosques is develop mentoring programs. Mentors should be able to help the new converts through the initial phase of conversion, but mostly help them navigate and socialize with the new group, help them with activities, sharing meals, connecting them to the rest of the community. And then the last thing I'm gonna show here is we did put these recommendations to a test with 2 sites, one in Michigan and one in Illinois. We conducted a pre-test survey asking mosque attendees to rate some of some statements, and then we did a post-test survey, and this process lasted between 6 months and a year. And the results show an overwhelming positive response to the changes. Highlights, for example, in Michigan, it says, the leaders in this mosque seem to care about me as a person. This was ranked 16 out of 21, and it went to 2 out of 21, with 1 being the highest. So it's a huge change here. I like the overall direction of this masjid. We went from being ranked 12 to being ranked 6, again, with 1 being the highest. We found statistically significant increases in responses to statements about mosque being welcoming. Again, welcoming, welcoming, welcoming. And Illinois is the same thing, significantly higher appreciation for mosque programs like social services, outreach, and interfaith youth programs. And then the last statement is, I find the Jum'ah khutbah to be inspiring and relevant, also changed from 11 to 6 out of 21. And the open-ended questions, in the past year, the masjid has transformed after they implemented our recommendations. The mosque has changed a lot with many positive changes. So if you're interested in any of this, you could contact ISNA. Dr. Ihsan Bagby is with us today. We could talk about more of the workshops that could be conducted, or we could share the toolkit with you. All of this will be mailed out to you, but I want to switch right now quickly to our panelists, starting with Dr. Ihsan Bagby. So Dr. Ihsan, you were the principal investigator on this project, Reimagining Muslim Spaces. Can you share with us, or what did you find were the most important factors for converts to feel welcome and engaged in a mosque?
Thank you so much, and thank you to ISPU for doing this important research, and I hope you keep it up. And if I can make a plug, support for ISPU will hopefully, ensure that even more research on these questions will be done. Let me just give, our focus was to try to move mosque in America to be more welcoming, in this particular case, more welcoming to converts. So our aim was not necessarily to work with those mosques that are doing well, but to work with all mosques and to try to push them, those who think they would like to, but are not doing it anyway, to move the needle. And I just have a few minutes, so let me give the quick playbook of what we learned from our many, many interviews and focus groups that we held. One, have a mentor in your mosque who will take on the responsibility of developing a relationship with the new convert. Socialization is probably the most important aspect in the new life of a convert as a Muslim. And, the reality is almost all mosques have converts through the year. So what we want is that every mosque have one or a few people designated as mentors, and then they are assigned to the new Muslim. Their job is first to socialize. So especially in the first month, contacting them in the first month, at least twice, sitting down with them, preferably in your own home, and simply being a friend. That is probably the most important aspect. Obviously, with that comes opportunities to educate. Most new Muslims are motivated already to learn. So that is lighting the fire to learn about Islam is not the issue. They already, in almost all cases, have a desire to learn. So it's not necessarily being the teacher, but being the facilitator of their learning about Islam. So it is not the main purpose of the mentor, but it is an aspect of what the mentor must do. Our suggestion is that the mentor should be with the new convert for a year, making contact, socializing on a regular basis in the first 3 months, and maybe lessening up somewhat after the first 3 months, but depending on the new Muslim themselves. The second aspect of the playbook is to develop a support group, whether informal or formal. In most masjids, it's going to be informal. So what the mentor needs to do and what the masjid needs to do is to identify other converts, other people who are interested in helping converts, and then this group provides a support group to meet, let's say, at least once a month. Hopefully out of that support group will emerge a friendship. So the convert needs a mentor, but also they need a friend, and typically that friend is more like them, similar background. And the support group will hopefully widen the network for a new convert such that they can find that friend. And in a sense, that friend and other friends that they make will substitute for the convert as the person progresses in integrating into Islam. Third point of the playbook is making sure that every masjid has proper educational material, has recommended websites, has a kind of facilitates the educational experience. The good masjid, the masjid that's really on top of things, will arrange formal educational events. If you have a few converts, a new Muslim class. So, but the educational experience is the responsibility of the masjid, and at least facilitating the educational process of the Muslim. I mean, so many of our converts mentioned that what they appreciated most about their masjid was the fact that they were able to learn at their masjid. The masjid facilitated their learning about Islam. That's the third point. The fourth and last point of our playbook is to hold social events for converts, especially around the major holidays, during Ramadan and other periods of time, around American holidays, especially Christmas and things like that, to hold events that will again give them a sense of belonging to a group. Also, one recommendation when you have a social event, to make sure you invite the convert family to the event, because often the contact with the convert family with other Muslims helps allay their fears that, you know, their son or daughter is joining some crazy cult and things like that. So that's our quick playbook. I didn't want to take too much time. The main distraction for a convert is the unwelcoming environment that they find. So, you know, and this is our general message to masjids. One, the masjid needs to make very clear to everybody that it is not their job to be the haram police. It is not the individual attendee at a masjid to try to correct people. What we recommended is that in the masjid, there should be people who will take the responsibility of talking to Muslims. So a new convert comes to the masjid not covered properly or whatever, you know, with a t-shirt with the devil on it, you know, I don't know. It is that what you have to get across to Muslim attendees, it's not their job to intervene. What they need to do is to make sure masjid leadership or those designated within the masjid to approach converts, to approach people. Again, many of our attendees in our sessions said one, that they were approached in a very hostile, rude way, negative. But they were also, they mentioned positive occasions where they were approached in a very brotherly way. And they appreciated the fact that they were told, you know, the Islamic view of things like that. They appreciated it because it's like people were concerned. So we have to, you know, that's a fundamental, that converts should not feel that they come into the masjid, they're going to be cut down and they're to be looked down upon. That's going to be a change of culture in masjids, and takes a lot of work to change those attitudes. And I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bagby. I'm going to hand it over to Sheikh Dr. Gray. You're the founder of Rabata. And as a convert yourself, what are the needs of Muslim converts that are not being met at mosques? I know Dr. Bagby mentioned some of them. And what do you think are some of the obstacles to meet those needs? You're muted.
There we go. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having this very important conversation. As the work that, I'll limit it to 3 things here, just so that I don't overlap, although I really appreciate what Dr. Bagby had to say, because it was all really important and really important aspects of this process. So the 3 things that I've been thinking about a lot, and as we work in convert care, the 3 things that come up a lot and come up really very often. The first one is to really reflect on what is our concept of sacred space, and what do we think of when we're thinking of sacred space as a community, and what is a convert thinking of when she's thinking of sacred space when she enters into community, and what is the main purpose of the mosque. So we have Islamic centers, and we have masjid, and we have, you know, the prayer space within the Islamic center. And all of these different spaces have different designated goals, of course, but we need to be thinking about the larger picture. But just for a moment, I'd like to think just about that prayer hall, the prayer hall, and what is the main purpose of that. And the main purpose of the prayer hall is prayer. It's worship. And it is sometimes khutbah. And those are the main purposes. And so it's very important for us as communities to just pause for a moment and make sure that our convert, men and women, have access in that main space for prayer and khutbah. That might seem obvious, but it isn't. One of the great issues that happened during this whole COVID experience has been that so many women have learned incorrectly that they can follow an imam from a screen, because they have been shoved off into a side room where the prayer, they are not part of the experience of hearing with their ears the imam who is saying Allahu Akbar in leading the prayer. And they also, when it comes time for khutbah, they're not part of that larger experience. They're shoved off into a room where, because it isn't the masjid space, it is often a space of crazy running around, screaming children and other things that don't give it the feeling of this is sacred space. And for a convert who is, especially a convert who comes from a church experience, that's going to be extraordinarily, extremely disappointing and frustrating. And it's going to feel as though they have lost access to a place to worship communally. And so the concept of that main prayer hall, that their access is for men and women, is critical. We've got to get over this. We just got to stop. I mean, I know I'm always, oh, women are the one who are asking for a separate space. Great, offer them one, but don't shut down the openness as the Prophet's mosque was in that main place, especially if you want to offer this space as a sacred space of inclusion for converts. It's a critical point. The second point is the issue of cultural familiarity and nostalgia triggers. And by nostalgia triggers, I'm looking for a positive trigger here, not a negative one. Cultural familiarity, what I mean by this is that the convert is coming to this space with certain cultural expectations, which very often are not met. And there's just, in a way, it's going to be sort of a, the reality that we're not going to be able to meet everyone's sort of way of thinking about culture. But we can address this, and in thinking about what are the things that trigger nostalgia. Nostalgia I'm defining here as those positive feelings you get that bring you back into a childhood feeling perhaps, or a feeling of that warm space where you were really happy and there were really good feelings. We want converts to find nostalgia triggers at the masjid. And we can do that intentionally. I remember when we did one of the workshops I do for converts is called Project Lena. And one of the conditions of doing the workshop is that you provide a holiday meal for the attendees. And so in America, that always meant a Thanksgiving meal. When I traveled overseas, that changed. So when we did it in Malaysia, it was a Chinese New Year traditional meal, which was really a learning experience for me and very exciting. But let's go back to the turkey, because I remember sitting in a state in the United States next to a woman after we had finished having this turkey dinner, and she started to cry, and I looked at her and I thought, oh dear, you know, what happened? What did I say? And I said, are you okay? You know, what happened? She said, you know, I'm crying because I never imagined eating my food in the masjid. Now, to many people, that might seem really silly and shallow, but that's what I mean by a nostalgia trigger. So a good memory of her childhood perhaps had come forth and met itself in the masjid. And that is one of the ways that we help to solidify new converts' faith, because we give them the ability to tie tendrils to their own childhood roots of what feels good, of what is faith, and what is faith in community. And we can do that intentionally. Dr. Bagby talked about a greeter. That's a very cultural thing. I mean, I remember when I first moved to Syria, I think it was weird to smile at people on the street. People thought I was strange. And that's a cultural thing. Here in America, if you don't smile at someone when they walk into the room, you've dissed them. Like, there's a problem. And so having a greeter becomes a cultural responsibility, not only for our converts, for our second generation Muslims who are growing up in a very different expectation of culture. And again, that will give that cultural familiarity. I'm in a place that I understand and that understands me. We need to think about, for cultural familiarity and nostalgia triggers, we need to think about food, smells. So what does the mosque smell like? Does the masjid always smell like heavy incense? We need to think about that. Is that the way it should always smell? Does the masjid much more often smell like wet socks? That is not going to help any convert. In fact, one of the reasons I don't go to the masjid is because so many and I'm in Minnesota. MashaAllah, many of the masjids here have grown in leaps and bounds. I'm talking about a lifetime of not going to the masjid, not the last 7 years necessarily. But very often it's because, especially the place where women pray, if you go down in Sujud, it's the most horrific of smells that you're having to deal with. And it is wet socks or mold or something else. So these kinds of smells are not welcoming. And they're not building of nostalgia, to be sure. And they also are really negative. They create negative memories and bitterness. So, and it's an actual feeling of you aren't wanted here. As a woman, especially, and I can't speak for male converts, but as a woman, when you go to the masjid and you're shunted off to a place that smells and is loud and is not part of the regular space, the message is, you're not really important here. And very often that's actually spoken. No, miss, your prayer is better at home. You know, so these are some really important things we need to think about. The third one is, I'm a little bit mirroring what Dr. Bagby spoke about, but I'll speak about it in a little bit. I'll try to address it a little bit differently, which is remembering that this is a social center. And in that social center, we want to include activities that are not just come and eat biryani, that are not political, or educational. So political and educational, I'm not saying we don't do them, but let's set them to the side for a minute and think as well, what are some social activities that we can do? Do we have luncheons for our elder sisters? Do we have mother-daughter luncheons? Now I'm using the word luncheon on purpose because it conjures up a particular way of thinking, which is not a buffet of large trays of rice. Do we have other events that are just addressing the social and emotional needs of our community that are not just activism? And please don't misunderstand me. It's important that our messages, of course, are involved in activism. But the question here today is how to make converts welcome. And that question needs to be answered in a much more holistic way than just what is on our plate right now of what I'm thinking about, whether that is a Syrian issue or a Palestinian issue or whatever other issue is happening today. We need to be thinking about a much more holistic concept of, and definitely some of the messages that are doing a great job in working on helping their congregants to get involved in the community, but I'm not even talking about that. Without saying that that's not important, it's important. I'm talking about just straight up social events that enrich a person's life and gives them community, because converts walk away from friends and they walk away from family. And certainly the mentor idea Dr. Bagby talked about is very important, but in this case, I'm trying to just address that there are other things we can do as well by creating social events that are just purely social. So the three that I would suggest are, let's really consider the purpose of our sacred space and inclusion in that space. Think about cultural familiarity and nostalgia triggers. And finally, really remember that we have to consider the social aspects of this center in this area, and in order to create events that are welcoming to our converts.
Thank you so much, Sheikha. Last but not least is Sheikh Abdullah Oduro. You know, ISPU have a lot of recommendations for making welcome in mosques for converts, and we collaborate a lot with Yaqeen Institute. You are the head of convert resources at Yaqeen. Alhamdulillah that such a thing exists. So can you please share with us or tell us more about what's available out there for converts and for mosques that want to or should be serving our convert brothers and sisters?
Bismillah. Can you hear me? Just want to make sure I'm heard. Yes? Okay. Another mute button. Sometimes you press it and you don't know that you pressed it or not. Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulullah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi man wala amma ba'd. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, may God send His peace and blessings upon all the prophets. Firstly, I am very, very honored to be a part of this endeavor, being that this is just a piece of the pie, a piece of the structure of the effort of consciousness and awareness. And you know, when I first came on with Yaqeen, you know, I was aware of ISPU, and it was very, very enlightening to me. I mean, the graphs that you showed earlier were very, very, very inspirational and educational. And then, mashallah, knowing Professor Bagby, I met him a long time ago. I don't know if he remembers, in Dallas. I don't know if you remember, we ended up speaking for like 2 or 3 hours, just standing there talking. There was a lot of wisdom, and I was just soaking it all in, you know, and it was very, very enlightening. And I was very, very happy to see that. And, you know, actually seeing him reminded me when I was studying in Medina University in the late 90s, and there was an Eid party, and it was in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. And this was the first time that I saw like a group of converts that were much older than me. And I was just amazed. I was saying, wow, I didn't even know they existed, because I'm from Houston, Texas, and that's in the South, and it's fairly ethnic there. You hardly would find, you know, converts that are, you know, that were older than me, that were in their 40s, 50s, that would be frequent in the mosque that I was in. So it was very culturally potent, if you will. I mean, just from certain cultures that were predominant in the masjid, if not the only demographic or culture that was there. So that's what I realized going back every summer. You know, I'd meet a convert here or there, and subhanAllah, when I come back in the summer, the following summer, you wouldn't see them. And then, you know, sometimes you get comments like, oh, well, they're not here anymore. You know, they probably went back to their lifestyle. But then the question I would always pose to the average congregants there is, what have you or the community, what have you done to make sure that they get over that transitionary phase? Because, with having any newer Muslim organization, if you will, especially the one that I started in 2010, it's really about, the goal is for them not to be called or to feel like they are a new Muslim anymore, right? It's to feel to where they can easily immerse into their respective communities. So just to make a long story short, because, subhanAllah, this is something that we can all expound upon and go on because we're so passionate about it. We're from it, or we've been deeply involved and intimate with people that have faced and are facing this reality. I think one of the main things that are important that mosques have and that we at Yaqeen are really, really trying to hone in on and are honing in on is consistency in providing, we can say, education or awareness. There's one thing that we have coming out is we have a series of videos that are going to be coming out for converts and for convert coaches, as we term it. For those, as Ustad Bagby mentioned earlier, that there has to be a mentoring system. As he mentioned, the first one, there has to be someone that is there that is serving, like, in the time of the Prophet, the mu'akha system, the brotherly system, to allocate someone for that convert or for that, dare I even say, the youth. Because what I've noticed a lot of times when I used to give seminars since, early to late 90s for new Muslims, is that half of the class would be that second generation American, as Dr. Tamara mentioned, that there will be the young man that has a friend from college and she wants to embrace Islam and they eventually get married. Or you'll find that youth that comes to you and says, I never learned Islam like this. I never knew what Islam was really about, right? So they're, if we want to say, theoretically converting to Islam themselves because they never really knew what it was. So when we're talking about converts, a lot of times we need to even include the youth because they were never introduced to it in a conducive fashion, or they were, as they say, you have to connect before you even correct. There's never been that connection with their existing mosques because it was never culturally relevant. And that's what, mashallah, they alluded to earlier and they mentioned earlier. So one thing that we try to provide is that we'll be providing our consistent videos and packages for Muslims that Mr. Bagby even alluded to earlier, addressing those individuals. A lot of times it's the friend in college and MSA that his classmate wants to or is interested in becoming Muslim. What are some resources that you can provide them? Understanding that everyone may not read, something that's a long thought out research paper on a particular issue. But again, there has to be some kind of nourishment along with a social structure for them on a consistent basis. So what we want to do is, provide for them videos and seminars and also presentations for those that are in their beginning stages of learning and practicing the basics of Islam. And as Sister Tamara mentioned, so eloquently, the issue of cultural relevance is so important. And that's really the lens in which people look to accept something in general. There's a beautiful paper on ancestral knowledge that's written with Yaqeen, and it's talking about how many different cultures, from an epistemological standpoint even, how we sometimes as Muslims and people that are from different areas of the world and come to America, we may not even realize that we quote unquote otherize and further minimize different people that come into the mosques, and that just further alienates them. And we may not realize that, but it's, that paper was so phenomenal for me because it created a sense of the importance of awareness of those that are comfortable within their Muslim spaces, but realizing it may be very, homogenous, and that there are people that really want to join this faith. And because of what you have all mentioned, it may be sometimes alienating those individuals. This is beyond, but also including food and dress and even, certain events, how to approach knowledge, how, we approach the people understanding Islam and the way that what we may consider chaste and unchaste. This paper was phenomenal in that. So really what we want to provide again is those videos, small as, if you may be familiar, we have something called Yaqeen Academy. It's bite-sized videos within a Google Classroom structure that people can take quizzes on and learn as well. And also we have, there's conversations where it's like a game type structure, and within the research papers for each paper, we try to trickle it down and bring it to a bite-sized mechanisms to where people of different demographics, backgrounds, thoughts, experiences can benefit from that which was written in a paper of some sort. And also, as many of you may well know, there's also the conviction circles that is kind of a level down from the actual paper. But I think most importantly is having well-groomed, high quality, consistent means of social and educational structures within. I mean, as of now, what we're seeing, you mentioned we're not going live, and it's very considerate of ISPU because of the cultural intelligence that is needed within the, dare I even say, the average Muslim community, of their concern of the African-American man, woman, and child, being that we saw the statistics, and that was even, you mentioned, from 25 to 28%. How many of them clicked the channel when they saw Ahmad and they said, oh, it's not Ahmed? Oh, okay. Or is it Ahmed? If it's Ahmed, khalas, we're going to stay on the channel. If it's not, they're going to flip their page. It's not, it doesn't concern them. Is that Islamic not to be concerned, right? I think it's very important for that education to come from people that are that understand well the convert, revert, new Muslim, renewed Muslim experience. And I think that's very important. So that's really what we really want to concentrate on at Yaqeen, is really providing those products and resources from an audio, from video all the way to written material that can well equip communities, masjids, and individuals alike, inshallah.
All right. Thank you so much, Jazakumullah khair, for the wealth of knowledge and information that was shared. And of course, there's tons of questions. We are counting 23 besides some that I was able to quickly answer. But like I mentioned to our attendees, we'll try to get to as many as we can in the next 7 minutes. And then we will find a way to answer the rest, inshallah, if not by the resources we share with them. So I'm going to ask a couple questions, and whoever, feels they could answer them, go ahead and jump in. We have, Assalamu alaikum, my name is Sarah Dean. Interfaith and Muslim organizations in the South Bay, Los Angeles. I'm also grateful. Okay, this is just a thank you. Thank you so much, Sister Sarah. The question here is, was any of this research conducted in a Shia mosque? And can you provide guidance on what need to be done in the mentorship program? Can we be a little bit more specific on what the mentorship program looked like?
Well, the research was not done in any masjid. We did focus group and interviews, and there were Shiites who were involved in the focus groups. So we did not ignore them. We felt that overall the issues apply both to Sunni and Shiite mosques.
Okay, thank you. The next question here says, does the mentor need to be a convert themselves?
Our feeling was that no, the mentor does not need to be a convert. Yes, it would be nice. That would be maybe more ideal. But in many communities, you might not find that person who has the time and the interest. The point is that they need to be a people person. That's what's important. You want them to really be able to befriend this new convert. So it has nothing to do with necessarily their background, although it might help if the mentor was a convert.
Can I add something to that? I think it's also important that the mentor is not a person who's going to suddenly decide that they own this convert, because we get this a lot with people that feel they're not going to decide for their convert where she can go, what she can do, what YouTube video she can watch. I mean, it can become really a very toxic situation. So I think training is definitely in order, and really looking out for this and making sure that, and that the convert is aware that this person doesn't own you. This is, you know, this is not an ownership. This is a mentorship. So that's just a side note there to add to that.
I might add that, you know, all of these recommendations need to, a lot more flesh need to be put on them. This is a second level of work that needs to be done. And then a coordination to really to publicize these, to bring it to the individual mosque. And ISPU can help, but that's not really ISPU's job. And I'm really hoping Yaqeen and you know, the new manna under Imam Zaid and other organizations will step up to take this responsibility. Let ISPU do all the research to help understand what works, what doesn't work. Please, ISPU, we need that research. But there are other organizations needed to make these initial recommendations kind of, you know, put flesh on them.
Thank you. There are a couple questions about resources, and I know that's going to be a topic probably in all the webinars that we will be discussing. What do mosques that lack resources, what can they do to implement some of this recommendation without, you know, having the convert drive to another bigger mosque with more resources? So any one of you could please jump in.
Bismillah. Yes, we Yaqeen, just as Dr. Bagby mentioned, we plan to provide on and offline resources, primarily online, obviously, because there's going to be guided videos and content. But what I'm envisioning is really for, subhanAllah, if there's a particular mosque, you know, there's a dawah team, there's an MSA, and there's, you know, some vibrant brothers and sisters, you know, that, as we mentioned, they don't have to be a convert, but they're so passionate because they see that my colleague, we face the same experiences. We want to have the opportunity to go out there for a weekend, at least, to be able to give some cultural awareness to the convert, you know, revert reality. I mean, basically everything that was mentioned here, you know, I'm glad that I see 70 people on here, you know, for that awareness to be articulated in the masjid. So one thing that I used to do when I used to talk to, you know, I had a convert coaches seminar, and we have some videos. It's called 5 Guidelines for Every Convert Coach that will be coming out. Is basically take the opportunity on a day that you know that everyone's in the mosque, and if you're someone that has a position in the community, you know, to get up on the microphone at the masjid, or to have that consistent class where they see that convert or revert or what have you sees that you have a position in the community, and that helps with their immersion within the general community. But like I said, there's going to be trial and error. I tell convert coaches, you're going to make mistakes. You're not you are their scholar. You know, the scholar may know the text, but not the context, to where you'll know the context and not the text. So these are the types of issues that we talk about with coaches, but it has to be on a consistent level with an on and offline experience. So Yaqeen, we are working on that to provide that, inshallah.
Thank you so much. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We are at 4 o'clock and there's still tons of questions to go through. So what I'm going to do is I will download the questions and follow up with our speakers and find a way to get them to the attendees. But I want to thank everyone that's here. I want to thank Dr. Ihsan Bagby, Sheikh Abdullah Oduro, and Sheikh Dr. Tamara Gray. Their bios were attached, and we will be sending the links to their organizations and the work they do. There should also be a survey that will pop up very quickly after we end the webinar. It's only 3 questions. Please take a minute to fill it out and provide us with your input. And look out for our follow-up email with tons of resources and information to help you continue this conversation, as well as join us the rest of the month, once a week, for other topics on this series. So thank you, everyone. Jazakumullah khair, and stay safe, stay well.